These graceful and majestic creatures are manta rays. In an isolated corner of the globe, the enormous animals approach and interact with humans. And where there are mantas, there are sharks. A close relative of sharks, manta rays have highly developed brains and appear to possess unusual intelligence. Researcher Dr. Robert Rubin studies the fascinating behavior and biology of mantas. And the best place to find them is 250 miles southwest of the tip of Mexico's Baja Peninsula. These are the giants of San Benedicto. Most fish are cold-blooded and are not generally considered intelligent. Manta rays, however, appear to be warm-blooded, have very large brains, and are perhaps even smart. The giant animals were once called devilfish because their cephalic fins resembled the horns of a devil. Now known to be harmless filter feeders, manta rays prey on nothing larger than tiny fish and plankton. Sometimes measuring over 20 feet across, they glide through the water like seabirds on an ocean breeze. Manta rays are elasmobranchs, fish whose skeletons are made of cartilage rather than bone. They are essentially modified sharks, but unlike sharks, manta rays have highly developed brains, the largest of any fish. In behavioral terms, they are far more advanced than their shark cousins. Found primarily in tropical waters, mantas also occur in cooler subtropical and occasionally even temperate seas. These ocean voyagers are definitely not your average fish.
Rays are, for the most part, flattened sharks. They have all the characteristics of sharks, with the exception of the fact that their bodies are flattened from top to bottom. They differ from sharks in that they live most of their lives on the bottom as opposed to living in the open ocean. Manta rays are somewhat different than the classic description of the rays in that they're very large in size. They've appeared very recently evolutionarily, and like sharks, they're pelagic, that is, they swim in the open ocean. Evolutionarily, sharks are a very old group, and they appeared about 350 million years ago. And for a long period of time, sharks were the only cartilaginous fish on Earth. During the Triassic period, most sharks experienced a worldwide extinction during a period of time when the seas were not highly productive. There wasn't much food. And when they reappeared a number of millions of years later, rays also appeared. And so rays are much more recent than sharks as a group. And mantas are the most recent. They appear first in the fossil record about 20 million years ago.
Dr. Robert Rubin is a college biology professor and also one of the world's foremost authorities on manta rays. When not teaching in Central California, he spends much of his time studying the enigmatic animals. His passion, unraveling the mysteries of this little-known giant.
I was attracted to manta rays when I first saw them in the southern Sea of Cortez 30 years ago. I doubt that I've ever seen an animal that has more charismatic grace and elegance. As a biologist, we become very curious about animals at the extremes. I've always been interested in animals that seem to be pushing either environmental limits or evolutionary limits. The beauty and the grace of the animal, coupled with the fact that almost nothing was known about them, and the fact that they seem to live in a very unusual environmental niche, can't help but attract a curious biologist.
Mantas have a great deal in common with many species of sharks, especially large filter feeders such as basking and whale sharks. Similarities between the two groups also extend to their preferred foods and habitat.
Manta rays and a number of species of sharks are almost always found to coexist in similar habitats. And in large part, this is a function of the availability of food. Most of these offshore reefs and underwater seamounts experience extensive periods of upwelling. And it increases the nutrient quality of the water, and the food chain begins with that. And so there's always food. And as the food goes, the mantas and the sharks go. It's one large pelagic community following the food.
Dr. Rachel Alexander studies the biology of manta rays. At her lab in Cape Town, South Africa, she made an unusual discovery.
A large devil ray had washed up at one of the local beaches here in Cape Town, and while we were working this animal up, I came across a large network of blood vessels in the pectoral fin. The structure of this plexus suggested that it was used to warm the swimming muscles of the animal, which indicate that the species of ray is warm-bodied.
Many scientists believe the evolution of blood warming in wide-ranging species, such as manta rays, is related to a phenomenon called niche expansion. Most fish that are cold-blooded don't venture very far from their preferred habitat. But when body temperatures are elevated above those of the surrounding sea, animals can migrate into colder waters.
These rays have been known to occur in differing water temperatures, colder waters than normally expected for these animals that live in tropical and subtropical regions. There's even an unconfirmed report of manta occurring in waters off Alaska.
Manta rays appear to heat not just their bodies, but their oversized brains as well.
Manta rays have extraordinarily large brains when you scale them to their body size. In fact, their brains are not too dissimilar to what you'd expect for a mammal of that size, not a fish. And as we look at the brains, we see that not only are they large in size, but the specific areas that are expanded to make them large in size are the same areas that are expanded in the mammalian brain. Recent work has supported the fact that they're probably maintained at a higher temperature. So it's a huge step evolutionarily, and it has allowed them to occupy areas in the world that other rays couldn't be successful in.
Where is the best place in the world to study mantas? And how do you track their movements through the sea? To study manta rays, a team of researchers and filmmakers traveled to the southwestern tip of Mexico's Baja Peninsula. The region is a busy tourism and sport fishing destination and the gateway to the remote Socorro Islands. In Cabo San Lucas, the scientist and high-definition video crew boarded the liveaboard diving vessel Solmar 5. It would be their home at sea for several weeks. The expedition included Bob Rubin, his colleague, microbiologist Dr. Gavin Chilcott, and veteran cinematographers Tom Campbell and Dennis Kaufman. Before departure, Rubin and Chilcott prepared their research tools, including acoustic surveillance equipment.
Gavin and I built a PVC cage that would fit over one of the skiff's sides that we could attach a hydrophone to. That allows us to actively track the animals around the island, so we can use the tags in an active way by following them in the skiff with a hydrophone. And so it gives us a daily pattern of the animal's movements.
After a 24-hour, 250-mile journey southwest, the expedition reached San Benedicto Island and the Socorro Archipelago. Desolate and inhospitable, the islands offer little refuge and have been spared the ill effects of human settlement. The isolated region is, however, a beacon to sharks, whales, and other pelagic animals. The barren islands are part of a volcanic undersea mountain range that includes the Galapagos Islands. Lonely outposts in the open Pacific, they rise thousands of feet from the sea floor. While there is little sign of life above the surface, the surrounding sea teems with activity. Volcanic spires swarm with schools of fish. Upwellings of cold, nutrient-rich water deliver a steady supply of plankton. And where there is food, sharks and rays are sure to follow. The main islands in the group, San Benedicto, Clarion, and Socorro, are spread out over hundreds of square miles. Bob Rubin has made dozens of trips to the archipelago. San Benedicto Island in particular is arguably the best place on the planet to study the giant rays.
We're now into about the 20th year of working on these animals and about the 15th year of working at San Benedicto. We've chosen San Benedicto as a study site because it certainly is unique in the major locations in the world where mantas are found. And the mantas numerically are found in greater abundance here than any place else in the world that I know of. And they come back. So it allows us to take a look at them over a long period of time.
At San Benedicto Island, Bob Rubin and Gavin Chilcott explore recent evidence of volcanic activity.
The geologists figure that this has been formed in three major events. Once the big cone came up, and then volcanic dust, and then recently, 1952, this whole lava flow just broke out in here split out the side and flowed into the open water. This turns out to be one of the more interesting places in the world. So new that you can study the formation of land plant communities, marine communities. The first time I came here, there was no vegetation on the island at all except some gourds. I've always really liked islands. I think they're really enchanting. And this one, I've been on a lot of oceanic islands, but I think this one is one of the most charismatic and intriguing to me. It's just so another landscape from another time.
One of the main goals of the expedition was to track mantas with high-tech acoustic tags. The devices would allow the researchers to monitor the animal's movements and provide a wealth of other valuable data.
Recently, in an effort to find out more about manta movements and the way in which they use specific habitats, we've begun to apply small acoustic tags that allow us to track the animals by using underwater listening stations. The listening stations are receivers that are placed at various locations in the habitat around the island and are running continuously. As the animals swim by, they pick up a ping from the tag that's been attached to the animal and record it. And so it gives us a pattern of when animals are in the habitat, what the water temperatures are like when they're there, and also how frequently they're there. Often these shallow bays are places, in the morning particularly, mantas will come in and move around these bays. Interestingly, in the later afternoon, they seem to go around from point to point. Actually, what we want is we want to be as close to the tip of the lava flow right there as we can get to get at least one good mark on the GPS.
Let's stop for a second. I think I might have heard a ping there.
Let's do it. Analyzing the data has shown us that the animals are present somewhat infrequently, and for the period of time that the tags have been out and the animals have been recorded, they're only in the habitat about 2% of the time. The rest of the time they're away from the island, and they may be moving between islands, they may be in deep water. We're not sure where they are, but we know that they're not close to the listening stations. We also have found that they're primarily animals of the early day. During the night, we have very, very few hits from our stations suggesting that during the daylight hours they're present, and during the dark hours they're not around the island at all. Well, this animal is probably right behind this lava flow. We just got several pretty strong signals, and then they're gone now. And the only thing you can guess is that it's going in and out of those troughs. Coming out, we get a signal. When it goes back in, we don't get one. Let's go see.
To find out where the rays migrate when they are away from the islands, Ruben utilizes a new tagging system based on satellite technology. The devices are attached to the animal's body, where they begin to acquire and store information. After gathering data for up to a year, the tags are pre-programmed to detach and float to the surface. They then search for a satellite and, after receiving a strong signal, begin downloading information. The tags record a number of factors, including water temperatures, dive depths, locations, and in some cases even swimming speeds. Satellite monitoring is a dramatic leap forward in manta research.
Satellite tracking will allow us not only to determine how the animals use the specific habitats that we know they're found in, but also how they might move between islands and other habitats. We may also see that there's a well-defined migratory pattern that connects groups of islands or different areas of the ocean that become critical areas to protect.
Oh, that wasn't as impressive. You never make it in the Puerto Rican guys just coming up like that.
This particular tag was set up so that it'll come up on New Year's Day.
New Year's Day?
Yeah.
Oh.
So
Wow.
we'll get the data. We'll have the computer in one hand, and a bottle of champagne in the other.
Yeah.
We'll give you a call. This is the first time I've ever seen mantas at this site, and interestingly enough, one of the animals that we know from San Benedicto, we did see here 30 days later. And that's the only other time that I've ever seen mantas at this site. So we know that they move between at least those two sites, and the satellite tag will tell us a little more.
Yeah, maybe they follow some deep ridge line or
That
something.
could be. All these islands are on the same underwater ridge system, and that may be what they're using as a migratory cue.
Yeah, possibly.
Why do manta rays approach and interact with humans? And who are the hitchhikers on their backs?
All right, are we ready? Let's go. Ready.
In the Socorro Islands, it doesn't take long to find mantas. Drawn to the sound of boat motors, the animals immediately approach and exhibit their renowned behavior. Even after 20 years of studying the rays, Bob Rubin is still amazed at how the animals court human company.
The interactions that exist between manta rays and humans are not only curious, but remarkable. And I think it's fair to say that nowhere else in the world can people interact with wild vertebrates of this size and these numbers. Wild vertebrate animals are not normally curious about humans except as potential predators or perhaps prey. But mantas seem uniquely curious about human organisms to the point of courting the interactions, coming very, very close and making eye-to-eye contact, and allowing humans to stroke them, ride them, pet them. Just about every possible type of contact that a person could make is not only possible, but it seems to be promoted by the behavior of many of the animals. The complexity of manta brains suggests that they may be able to carry out a lot of higher functions that we normally associate with mammals. And their behavior seems to reflect some of those characters. I think it's fair to say that they're curious, and curiosity to some degree is a sign of intelligence.
One of the most intriguing aspects of manta and human interaction is that the animals appear to favor certain divers. In simple experiments, Rubin has attempted to discover how they choose their favorite playmates.
Certain mantas will allow certain individual humans to come close while moving away from others. And we wondered as to how they might be able to tell. And so in small little experiments, we've changed diving gear. And they still are able to recognize the person that they would allow to come close and the person that they reject. And we also were able to show that by putting tinfoil in our masks where they couldn't see our eyes, they no longer could tell who the person was that they wanted to ride or the person they'd reject. And so the speculation is that they're recognizing us by our eyes. And their close proximity and the fact that they come right next to you and look eye to eye may in fact support that.
Mantas and other large pelagic animals play host to a strange fish called remora. The hitchhikers attach themselves to their rides with a specially adapted dorsal fin. Whale sharks, such as this 45-foot giant, are frequently covered with dozens of the fish. The bigger the host, the larger the size and number of remoras. Even a juvenile whale shark has to contend with the pesky freeloaders.
Mantas are very much like a floating community. In open water, very big organisms like this attract a lot of other organisms that use manta rays either as shelter, protection from predators, as a source of transport from one spot to another, or perhaps even a guide to take the other species to food. One of the organisms that exists in close association with mantas are large remora fish that are sometimes called suckerfish. It was thought for a long period of time that remoras were parasitic and were using the mantas as a point of attachment and cleaning the mantas to some degree, symbiotically taking parasites and so on off of their body, or perhaps just picking up the scraps after a manta meal.
To investigate the relationship between the two fish, Ruben enlisted the services of a freediver. But catching one of the wily fish was no easy feat, especially without scuba gear. Even if you do manage to grab onto them, remora's iron grip make extraction difficult. They do, however, make great handles for an exciting manta ride.
You can see the disc, and this is a fin. Yeah, this is the dorsal fin, the same fin that you see in a shark. It's just modified into a sucker. And in a regular fish, the fin rays that go into the fin to hold it up have been modified here into these sucking arrangements. They tie in, and they pull into the skin and create a suction, and also a grip. You can feel the reverse spines here. It's kind of like a gill, but of course it's not, and those are just the rays of the fin. The inside of the gills are overlapped. They may be straining plankton in the same way the mantas are.
The remora revealed an exciting discovery. Remoras, like mantas, appear to have their own hitchhikers.
These are copepod parasites. They're very interesting, probably unknown. I would bet this is a new species. These kinds of parasites are species specific. So it could be that this kind of copepod parasite, this species, is found only on remoras. There are similar copepods like this, but they have much longer tail structures, tail-like structures, that are found in the dorsal fins of sharks.
Back at his lab, Ruben made a more thorough examination of the unusual fish. His findings have helped to disprove many long-held theories about remoras and their relationship with their hosts.
One of the things that's kind of interesting about him is that when you look at the mouth of the animal, the mouth is disproportionately large. It has a really big mouth for a fish of this size. And then you look at the gills of the animal here, and see how large the gills are. They're really big, almost like the fish were some kind of a pelagic swimmer, like a tuna. Among mantas and also among the great whales, we see exactly this sort of thing that suggests that instead of feeding on fish, as one might expect, that they've been feeding on some kind of planktonic organism. And I think this is a fairly reasonable verification of the fact that these animals are planktivores just like the mantas, and they just use the manta rays as taxi cabs to the restaurant. A very unusual fish, one of the great feats of evolutionary design in the marine world.
How do you tell mantas apart? Are they a potential source of new miracle drugs? And what is the most popular attraction at one of the world's largest aquariums? Despite the fact that manta rays are very large in size and widely distributed, relatively little is known about their biology or genetics. All mantas are considered to be members of a single species, although they are sometimes referred to as either a Pacific or an Atlantic manta ray, depending on where they're encountered. The rays also have two distinct body patterns.
Manta rays occur in two different color types. One of them with white on the back and a large V at the base of the dorsal fin, and we call those chevron mantas. And others are solid black, like large stealth bombers, and we call those black mantas. The black mantas are not found typically in warmer tropical waters, whereas the chevron pattern seems to be the most common pattern worldwide.
Individual manta rays, like orcas and humpback whales, have distinguishing characteristics. These subtle and sometimes dramatic differences enable the researchers to utilize photo identification.
Each animal has a different marking, very much like an individual fingerprint. By looking at these through time, we've been able to establish that they don't change. And so that once you have a photograph of an animal's undersurface, you can enter it into a catalog and you can match it time after time to new photographs. We've identified now 146 individuals, and of that 146 animals, we've seen about 40 animals more than once. Some of the animals we know for as long as 15 years. The photo identification system allows us to get an estimate as to how big this population is and whether it's what biologists call an open or closed population. And that really means, are animals moving in and out of it from other sources, or does this population represent one large group of animals that are genetically related, like large families?
Bob Rubin and Gavin Chilcott's research includes DNA sampling of manta tissue. These clues help the researchers piece together a difficult genetic puzzle. Acquiring a DNA sample requires a specially tipped spear that extracts a plug of tissue the size of a pencil eraser. A quick jab from a sharp spearhead, not unlike a mosquito bite, secures the sample. The difficult part is trying to catch the speedy mantas.
In sampling small amounts of skin and surface tissue, we're able to bring that tissue back to the laboratory and analyze the sequences in the DNA of the cells. Those sequences, when compared to other samples, will tell us the kinship similarities between individual mantas and also between groups of mantas, for example, those found in one group of islands as opposed to those found in another.
Boy, that was about the most cooperative manta
Boy, no kidding.
you'll ever find in your life.
Yeah. That was successful despite a false start there.
You didn't get the DNA sample in the first go,
Well,
did
the
you?
tissue didn't retain. We did get a good punch, but the tissue didn't come out with the tip, and I'm not sure why. So we changed the tip, and the second tip was successful.
So you got a good sample in that one.
Got a good sample.
The research team also collected samples of the mucus coating of mantas. potential healing properties of the mucus may one day be the source of new wonder drugs.
Elasmobranchs as a group, the sharks and the rays, seem to have a remarkable capacity for wound repair and tissue regeneration. Manta rays are covered with a very fine mucus film. One of the new things we've become interested in is the role that this mucus might play in protecting manta rays from pathogens, from bacterial invaders. And so recently we've collected some of this mucus and brought it back for laboratory analysis. It's possible that mucuses of this type may have antibacterial qualities not only for the mantas, but also for human skin as well. And it's theoretically possible that things like this could be produced by pharmaceutical companies and used to enhance wound repair and decrease the potential for infection. We know that we've extracted a lot of natural products, drugs and things that have been very useful in the human condition from tropical rainforests, and the sea seems to be the next frontier for that.
The Atlantis Resort and Casino in the Bahamas boasts one of the world's largest aquariums. And the #1 attraction for the past few years has been Bubbles, an Atlantic manta ray. Of course, sharks are a top draw for visitors, but their graceful cousin consistently ranked as the guest favorite.
Our sharks, I'd say, rate #2 in terms of attraction for the guests. And what outranks the sharks for us is our impressive manta ray that we have right here in the ruins tank. That's always the biggest draw for the guests, is to watch the manta ray. And because of the size, right now this one that we have in the tank is just over 13 feet in width.
Bubbles easily acclimatized to her new surroundings. But with daily feedings, she dramatically increased in size. Once Bubbles reached a wingspan of almost 15 feet, it was clearly evident that she had outgrown her artificial home. A reluctant decision was made to release her back into the wild. Capturing and transporting such a huge animal was no easy feat. Timing was critical, and a helicopter waited on standby. Released within just a few minutes, she quickly bolted into the depths.
Basically, she just outgrew the aquarium. They grow really quick. They almost double their size in the first year. So we had to release her. It went very well. It was a great effort, great team effort.
A few days later, a 6-foot juvenile manta was caught off Rose Island. Like Bubbles before her, the new ray, appropriately named Rose, will be a top attraction at Atlantis. How does such an endearing animal find itself on an endangered species list? In February 1994, members of the conservation group Sea-Watch visited the Socorro archipelago. They were there to scuba dive and snorkel with the famed mantas. On Valentine's Day, Mexican fishing boats appeared and started pulling in nets off the southern tip of San Benedicto Island. Mantas that the group had been interacting with the day before were hopelessly trapped in gill nets. The entangled rays destroyed valuable fishing gear, and enraged fishermen killed the animals. Sea-Watch brought the disturbing video footage to the attention of the Mexican media. Influential television programs began airing the story, and networks from around the world quickly seized on the dramatic images.
Oh, God.
The footage was brought to the attention of the head of fisheries and the Mexican president. Government and public reaction was swift. Within 2 months, the Pacific manta ray was put on an endangered species list. It is now a crime to kill a manta ray in Mexico.
The islands are highly desirable as a fishing ground because they are so highly productive. And in the recent past, fishermen have used the islands to take large quantities of billfish, sharks, and a variety of other species, including manta rays. Manta rays were taken rather indiscriminately and killed rather viciously by fishermen because they were contaminating the nets. Mantas worldwide need protection because as you look at them biologically, they're first large animals that don't reach reproductive maturity until late in life. That's true of most sharks and rays. They are also characterized by giving birth to a single pup. And so it's then likely that a single female will give birth to maybe only 10 or 12 pups in her entire lifetime. Large animals like mantas can't survive without a conscious human conservation ethic.
Pretty spectacular.
Is there any mantas out there?
3. Three.
Black ones?
One black one and 2 chevron ones, and we got a very good measurement of one.
Oh, yeah?
Complete measurement of both the width and the length.
After nearly a month at sea, it was time to return to Cabo San Lucas. For Bob Rubin and the rest of the team, leaving was bittersweet. But the expedition revealed many new insights into manta biology, distribution, and behavior. After returning to his lab at Santa Rosa Junior College, Rubin began to receive results from his satellite tagging program.
We recently received information from 2 tags that had been out for approximately a month, and it translates into 890 pages of data. Speculation suggests that these animals are probably well away from the island in deep water, and all the indications that we have imply that the animals move away from the island at night into deep water to feed, and then return to the island during the daylight hours. And we know that in some cases we see animals at one island within a few days to several weeks, we see the same animal 100 kilometers away. The animals are present for a few years at a time and then often gone for several years at a time. So they may be perhaps thousands of miles away from these sites during other times of their life history, and the satellite tags will allow us to identify those trends.
The Socorro Archipelago and nearby Sea of Cortez were up until recently some of the richest waters on Earth. The undersea ecosystem in the region is now in danger of collapse. Industrial-scale gill netting dramatically depletes resources, and when fishing boats discard damaged nets, they continue to kill. Sharks, sea lions, and mantas are no match for the nearly indestructible lines. Long lining produces a huge bycatch of non-targeted species. Almost all the fish and other animals caught are incidental, worthless to fishermen. And Asian demand for shark fin soup fuels a wasteful there is hope. Due to the conservation efforts of groups such as Sea-Watch and the Save Our Seas Foundation, and scientists like Bob Rubin, mantas have a fighting chance of survival. The Socorro Archipelago is now a protected biosphere of Mexico.
Manta rays are one of the most incredible organisms the planet has ever spawned. And to watch them, to be around them, to have the ability to study them and know more about their biology is exciting beyond belief. I'm very optimistic about the future because I think some of the work that we're doing and the work of others will result in a much better understanding of who they are and how important they are in the structure of pelagic communities and in the world's oceans as a whole. Working with mantas is one of the most exciting things that anybody could do, and I love doing it every day. I hope to continue to do it as long as I'm here and as long as they're here, and I hope that they're here a lot longer than I am.
A male humpback whale, a singer. His complex and haunting song can be heard for miles underwater. Humpback migrations are legendary, epics of time and distance. These whales and others were hunted to the brink of extinction. But since a 1986 whaling moratorium, a few species, including humpbacks, have recovered some of their historic numbers. But whaling nations want to reopen the hunt. Japan currently kills whales in a controversial and lethal research program. In the Antarctic, massive factory ships stalk minke and fin whales. Now, they've announced their intentions to target humpbacks.
You're in a whale sanctuary and you're assisting in illegal activity. Remove yourself from these waters immediately.
Captain Paul Watson of the Sea Shepherd Society has made it his personal mission to shut down the whaling industry. In the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary, Watson and his teams chase, harass, and ram Japanese ships. They're heroes to many, pirates and eco-terrorists to others. Nations such as Tonga are being recruited to take sides with pro-whaling nations at the International Whaling Commission. But Tonga also has a fledgling whale watching industry. And whale watching is a very popular and lucrative business, especially in the Hawaiian Islands. In winter months, humpbacks are Maui's #1 tourist attraction. At Maui's Whale Quest, photographers, researchers, and conservation groups gather at an annual conference dedicated to humpback whales. There's no doubt the animals stir our emotions like no other creatures. humpback whales breaching, jaw-dropping acrobatic feats. These are the warm cobalt blue waters of Tonga, an island nation in the South Pacific. Humpbacks gather here to mate, give birth, and to rear their young. For months, adult whales do not eat. Females lose much of their body mass while nursing their enormous offspring. From the tropics, humpbacks then travel thousands of miles to rich feeding grounds in colder seas of both hemispheres. Considering they haven't eaten for half a year, it's a tremendous migration. They undertake this arduous journey for good reason. Whether it's krill in the Antarctic or herring in Alaska, humpback whales need to consume a lot of food before their return voyage. Hunted for centuries, whales fueled our insatiable appetites for oil, blubber, and countless consumer products. The slow-moving animals were no match for swift whaling vessels. With the advent of even faster, more modern ships equipped with explosive harpoons, hundreds of thousands of whales were killed. It eventually became clear that many species, including humpbacks, were in grave trouble. A global moratorium stopped the commercial hunt in the mid-1980s. And in 1994, the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary was formed in the waters surrounding Antarctica. In the decades since the moratorium, humpbacks and a few other species have rebounded in numbers. With many commercial fish stocks on the verge of collapse, there is a growing movement to once again target whales. This time mainly for their meat, literally tons of nutritious, protein-rich flesh from a single animal. The ban on hunting whales is still in place, but through a loophole, whales can be killed for scientific or research purposes. Japan is one of the leaders. The merits and legitimacy of this lethal research are hotly debated. Critics denounce Japan's scientific program as a front for renewed commercial hunting of whales. The Japanese counter that relatively plentiful and smaller minke whales that were not historically targeted are fair game. But the most contentious issue in the debate is that the animals are currently hunted in a protected area, the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary, where whaling is banned. And directly in their wake, trying to stop them, is the Sea Shepherd Society.
I set up Sea Shepherd to uphold international conservation laws, treaties, and regulations. So we intervene where there's criminal operations taking place, illegal whaling, illegal fishing, and that's what we've been specializing in over the years. So we're not a protest organization.
A respected and equally reviled activist, Watson has been instrumental in raising public awareness on many environmental issues. He developed his extreme form of activism at a very early age.
I was raised in a fishing village in New Brunswick, and I began to walk the trap lines and free the beavers and the other animals, and then I began to destroy the traps, and so that's where my activism started at 11. And then in 1969, at 18, I was the youngest founding member of Greenpeace.
On dry land for just a few months each year, Watson, now a U.S. citizen, bases his operations on San Juan Island in Washington state. Alongside annual campaigns against Canada's sealing industry, Sea Shepherd now directs much of their attention towards Japanese whaling in Antarctica. In the austral summer, hundreds of thousands of whales migrate to Antarctica. Countless marine mammals gather in these frigid seas to feed. This is the Sea Shepherd vessel, the Robert Hunter. Its mission, to hunt down Japanese whaling ships.
I had been wanting to go down and confront the Japanese fleet for years, but it wasn't until 2002 that we were able to afford our first campaign to go down there. And we just completed this year our 4th campaign to Antarctica. And it's proven to be more successful every year. Our tactic's pretty simple. We just simply chase them and they run and they don't kill whales. So they're only able to get half their quota over the last 2 years. I like to design tactics that aren't going to hurt anybody and are somewhat humorous. And so, you know, in the past we've had cannons that fire pie filling, chocolate or cream pie, and you know, you can certainly slime somebody with 45 gallons of chocolate. We're always constantly trying to come up with tactics that are designed to be effective, yet at the same time will not injure anybody that we're opposing.
The Japanese don't view Paul Watson's tactics as humorous and are definitely not amused. Smoke and stink bombs are just one of the many ways in which Sea Shepherd disrupts the operations of whaling ships. For weeks, even months at a time, Sea Shepherd teams search for Japanese ships. And the Antarctic is a massive territory to cover. Confrontations are rare and generally fleeting, but when they do encounter whalers, all hell breaks loose.
Kaiko Maru, this is the Robert Hunter. You've been identified as an illegal whaling vessel. We strongly advise that you leave the Southern Ocean's whale sanctuary immediately. This is not a protest action, this is a law enforcement action. Pack up your bags and head back to Japan, or we will shut you down.
Sea Shepherd utilizes many tactics in their mission to stop whaling ships. One of the more dangerous techniques is propeller fouling.
In the middle of an action, dude. Nicely done. You got a line around that prop? Yeah! Right on!
That prop fowler is really in there too. It's really turning around with the prop. You can see it swirling with the prop wash.
Very nice.
We get volunteers from around the world and we interview them. The one question that we sit down and ask them is, are you willing to risk your life to protect a whale? And if they say no, then we don't want it. People risk their lives and kill other people over real estate and oil wells. I think it's a far more noble thing to risk your life over protection of an endangered species or a threatened habitat.
I believe that we should save the whales because whales and dolphins are very intelligent animals. I think they're worth saving, that's why I'm down here. And we also give a very clear message to the Japanese fleet that we're not Greenpeace or not a protest organization. We're capable of doing a lot more and we want to stop them, shut down their illegal operation, because that's what it is. As long as they run from us, as long as we're in their slipstream, as long as we're on their tail following them, they can't kill whales. And they know that, so they'll always try to get away from us. Smoke them! Smoke them!
Smoke and stink bombs severely disrupt activities on the Japanese ships. The flensing decks can be rendered inoperative until they are thoroughly cleaned. One of the more noxious substances is butyric acid, which is found in rancid butter, vomit, and body odor. It really smells. When all else fails to send the whalers packing, a final and very controversial technique is to bump or even ram them.
Go ahead, dead ahead. 20. Stop!
Who rammed who in this January 2007 incident is still being debated, and both sides claim the other is at fault.
Check out damage, please. Need people checking the damage.
Maru, this is the Robert Hunter. This is not a protest action, this is a law enforcement action.
Holy look at the chip. Put me on a mayday, okay? Takes 20. Thank you, sir. Engine stop.
The Japanese did indeed issue a mayday. This wouldn't be the first or the last international incident in Sea Shepherd's Antarctic campaigns.
Oriental Bluebird, or should I say the SS Whale Meat, please remove yourself from these waters. You're in violation of international conservation regulations. We're acting in accordance with the United Nations World Charter for Nature and implementing these regulations. You're in a whale sanctuary and you're assisting in illegal activity. Remove yourself from these waters immediately.
Teams on board Sea Shepherd's second ship, the Robert Hunter, confronted the main factory ship, the Nishin Maru. In the next campaign, a Sea Shepherd team attempted a very risky maneuver, boarding a factory ship.
Be advised, they are attempting to throw Topsy overboard. I say again, they are attempting to throw Topsy overboard. Yushin Maru, this is Steve Irwin. You are detaining 2 of our crew members illegally. We strongly advise that you release them.
The 2 Sea Shepherd crew members were held briefly by the Japanese. They were eventually turned over to Australian officials who had helped negotiate their release. Back on board their own ship, they were greeted as heroes.
Cheers. Cheers. Life jacket.
The 2008 campaign would eventually take a darker turn. Sea Shepherd teams again threw stink bombs onto the deck of the Nishin Maru. But this time, the Japanese fought back. Armed guards tossed flash grenades at the Sea Shepherd crew.
Holy
Watson, who always wears a bulletproof vest, may have been shot.
Something hit me right here. He's been hit by a bullet.
Going as fast as I can. Yeah, I see him.
Sea Shepherd's future campaigns will no doubt be controversial and confrontational.
Every single marine mammal on this planet is endangered. Not only that, most of the fish are endangered. Every single commercial fishery is in a state of collapse. The oceans are dying. And so we've got to stop this massive exploitation of wild species. I think that we have to have a complete moratorium on raping the oceans. Because it's just out of control. There's simply too many people and there's not enough fish and animals in the sea to continue to support this incredibly rapacious appetite that we've developed.
Whether you agree or disagree with Sea Shepherd's tactics or their politics, they are, if anything, highly effective activists. There are alternatives to killing whales. Whale watching is a very lucrative business. A live whale can be worth far more than a dead one.
Oh my God, he is showing off.
This is Lahaina's Whale Row. Dozens of businesses geared to tourists line the waterfront. The main attraction here, whale watching.
Everybody ready to see some whales? Yeah! Let's go!
Each day in winter, hundreds of eager tourists crowd the waterfront, vying for space on a handful of whale-watching boats.
All right, watch your step there, folks. Welcome on board.
Take you at home.
Welcome aboard. Nope.
Whale-watching boats of all shapes and sizes head into the channel between Maui and Lanai in search of humpbacks.
My name is Nate. I'm going to be your naturalist on the mic, telling you what we're looking for out there today in North Pacific humpback whale. The main thing I think is so great about ecotourism is it gives a chance to people to get as close to these animals as legally and ethically possible. We get to take people out here and show them these whales, you know, literally probably the biggest thing they'll ever see in their lifetime. This is definitely the biggest tourist attraction here on Maui. I believe yesterday we had 492 people out. We're trying to break the record. Our goal is to get 500 people out here in one day.
Favorites of everyone, crew and guests alike, are the small calves.
We got a spy-hopping calf.
Pose, buddy, pose for us. It's beautiful.
A little head lunge that turned into a spy hop. Guys, he was looking at us. His eyes were just as well out of the water. He's checking us out. Welcome to a Maui mugging where you don't have to worry about your wallets. Now, another cool thing about watching these calves is they do have smaller lungs, so they aren't down that long. There's that.
No one ever seems to tire of Hawaii's most famous seasonal residents.
I love it. You know, the more time you spend out here, sorry, excuse me, whales up, 9 o'clock. The more you do it, the more you realize how magical this is, and to have a close encounter with the whale. Even for those of us that do this, I drive 14 charters a week. To have that experience is just absolutely unbelievable.
Before long, it's time to head back to the harbor to pick up yet another group of tourists. Make no mistake, this business makes a lot of money.
It breaks my heart, but we do have to start heading back towards Lahaina. So nothing makes whales fly out of the water faster than heading for home, so do keep an eye out behind us.
Did you guys have a good time out there today? That's what we like to hear. Well, she's absolutely right.
Private whale watching charters also depart from many of the island's waterfront resorts.
Welcome aboard, guys. Go ahead and follow that down. Go ahead, guys.
There she blows, 4 o'clock. There's another group, 3 o'clock. Every group you're seeing right now is mother calf escorts.
It's very difficult to describe the experience of whale watching. The animals trigger a strong emotional response in most people. There's just something magical about a close encounter with one of Hawaii's humpbacks.
Whales are amazing. You never appreciate them until you see them up close and get to experience their beauty and the size of them and hear the sounds, and it's really amazing. This is my favorite time of year. It's nice to have them here.
Right there.
Coming up, here he comes.
Hey, bud.
there. Hey. Wow. Yeah, that's the way to look at it.
What goes on in the lives of whales? Well, we're always curious about the unknown. I think maybe that's one of the strengths of being a human being, that the unknown is a challenge. And it's also a source of attraction and focus. And so here you have this gigantic animal that's bigger than anything that you've got on Earth, and yet you realize you don't know anything about it. You don't love things that you don't value, and you don't value things that you don't know. Whale watching is an avenue to getting to know something, which will lead to getting to value it, which will lead to being concerned with saving it.
Look at these whale soup, folks. There's 3 or 4 here.
Oh my God.
And there's one of the males, so the other 2 are probably to the left of him.
Wow.
Deep below the surface, a male humpback calls out to other whales. Singers have long fascinated and perplexed whale researchers. What exactly are humpbacks trying to say? Canadian scientist Dr. Jim Darling spends the winter months in Maui studying humpback whales. Each day, weather permitting, Darling and other researchers depart from Lahaina's harbor. Hawaii's humpbacks are one of the world's most heavily studied cetaceans, but there are still many unanswered questions about their behavior, especially their iconic songs.
Humpback whales spend the summer feeding all around the Pacific Rim, from northern California to northern Japan. In the winter, they migrate to breeding grounds in tropical waters, subtropical waters like Hawaii. The males are here to mate. The females have 2 roles when they're here. One is to mate, and the other is to give birth and nurse.
Whale researchers in Hawaii have made an encouraging discovery. Humpback numbers are definitely on the rise.
Population in the North Pacific is increasing, and increasing quite quickly. You know, since we started looking at whales here in the mid-70s, there's just no question that the numbers have at least quadrupled in this area. And all indications are is that the population is continuing to increase in numbers and is beginning to re-inhabit traditional ranges which were empty for decades after whaling. So in the present, right now, it appears that this particular population of whales is doing relatively well.
Darling motors around the channel looking for signs of humpbacks, specifically lone animals. Surprisingly, it's only the males that sing.
We've learned over the years that most singers are alone. They're lone males. And so, you know, if we're traveling along and we see any single blows, you sort of go over there just to check, because the odds are greater that they're singing than if whales are in groups.
The songs are so loud, they can be felt through the boat's hull.
We know that humpback males sing during the breeding season. The song is somewhat unique in the sense that it's a series of sounds which is repeated over and over, sort of every 10 or 15 minutes, and the song changes as it's being sung. It sort of gradually evolves as it's being sung. All the singers in a population sing the same version at any one time. So we've been attempting to understand what's going on. Why are they singing? What's the function? How does it work? I mean, what's the purpose of it all? It's clearly a fairly important part of their breeding behavior, because it's everywhere. I mean, you can't put your head in the water here without hearing song anytime from December through April. The greatest misconception about whale song is that it's males singing to attract females for mating purposes, and that idea has been around for several decades. The problem is that no one has ever seen a female attracted to a singer. Singers sing until other lone adults come and join them, but those other lone adults are other males. So we listen to the song, and there's a part of the song where usually just precedes them coming up, and you listen until it comes to that part of the song, and then you start looking around for whoever surfaces.
Before song recordings can be analyzed, the singers have to be identified. Each whale has a distinct tail fluke, much like a human fingerprint.
We always like to know which individual is attached to the song. We may be comparing songs of different individuals, or we may have repeat sightings of this guy, and we want to see how his specific song has changed over time. We also ID him because we may see him in different groups through the day. There's quite a bit of interaction going on here between the two males, and the mother and calf probably trying to stay out of the way. I and a handful of others around the world have been working on the song issue for what amounts to decades now, and we're getting closer. We're beginning to understand a little bit about the song. It is a puzzle. You just want to see how close you can come to solving it.
Jim Darling and others in the whale research community are very alarmed at news of humpbacks possibly being targeted by whalers. Hawaii's whales do not travel to Antarctica and would not be hunted, but there's concern that renewed commercial whaling would make its way eventually to the North Pacific. Many humpbacks, like these animals at play, have no fear of people or boats. They would make easy targets for whalers.
There is no question in my mind whatsoever that we don't have the kind of information that we should have to open any kind of whaling quotas on humpback whales. I mean, we have some vague idea of numbers in some areas, but we know virtually nothing of their social system or behavior, population definition, and so on. And until we know those things, any kind of whaling is just a huge gamble.
Researchers and whale watchers are not the only people concerned with the welfare of humpbacks. Photographers and filmmakers have long held a deep fascination with these enigmatic animals. Renowned artists such as David Fleetham, David Dubélé, and Flip Nicklin are strong opponents to the prospects of renewed commercial whaling. And at Maui's Whale Quest, these photographers, scientists, and conservation groups all gather for an annual conference dedicated to humpback whales. Still photographer David Fleetham has a special affinity for humpback whales. Maui resident for over 20 years, Fleetham has encountered more than his fair share of whales. He fondly recalls one of his first experiences with a humpback.
Down in the South Pacific was the first place I saw one underwater. They're so enormous, it's like a huge bus swimming around underwater. It really takes your breath away. It's hard to believe that anything alive is that big. One whale stayed underneath our boat for probably about 4 hours. We stopped and had lunch, which if anybody told me I was going to be eating a sandwich, and as a humpback whale was swimming around my boat, I would have told them they were nuts. When you slipped into the water, it would immediately swim straight over to you, and it would hold its pectoral fin out and wave it only just a few feet in front of your face. I have no idea what the whale was trying to tell me. Finally, I was like, well, I have that shot and I have that shot. And so I started getting as tight as I could, and I got a shot of the tubercles. Around their jaw, on the top and the bottom of their head, are bumps, and each bump contains a hair. And for the first time, I actually got a shot where you can see the hair in the tubercle. When humpbacks sing, the sound is so loud, you can hear it before you even get in the water. It reverberates through the hull. And once you get in the water, there's some low sounds that they make where you actually get shaken underwater by it. The first time that I ever free dove down onto a singer, the sound was so loud I couldn't hold my breath. I ended up coming back up and going, all right, calm down, take a few deep breaths, and then dive back down. The singers are phenomenal.
Freedom shares the concerns of many that renewed commercial hunting of whales, especially humpbacks, is a grave mistake.
It seems that to begin whaling again at this point in time is ridiculous. The whales have been protected for so long. In the 20 years that I've been in Hawaii, I hear more and more of encounters between boats and whales, friendly encounters, where the whales approach the boat and they stay around the boat. But the whales, I think, are just getting more and more acclimatized to people and boats and have no fear of them. To now begin hunting them is like hunting bears in Yellowstone Park. The humpback has just now reached the point where it's a question whether or not it is still an endangered species. To, at this point, go out and be killing them, it just seems ridiculous. We just barely got through possibly saving them. Historically, man's capability of even managing a fishery is hopeless. You know, we target one species until they're gone, and then we hit another species until they're gone. So to put something that we've just now saved back on the killing list is, to me, ludicrous.
Feel that power.
Kapalaua's Whale Quest Conference, a diverse group of artists, researchers, and conservation groups gather to celebrate Hawaii's most famous cetaceans. Scientists like Dr. Jim Darling present some of their most recent findings to an eager public. Everyone here, it seems, loves humpback whales.
Whale Quest is a 3-day event that we put on every year to help try to bring the research community together with the public so that we can share what we're learning about whales and try to get everyone as excited as we are about what we have right here in our backyard. We have up to 60% of the North Pacific population of humpbacks coming here every year. What we want to do is share that information with as many people as we can and get it out. And Whale Quest Kapalua is one way that we can do that. So we try to incorporate and include people that are looking at the ocean, that are passionate about the ocean from a number of different perspectives, from photography, from videography, cinematography, as well as the science, because it's really that combination of all those things that will lead, hopefully, to people becoming inspired and getting excited about conservation.
The size of these creatures in the water is extraordinary. It's that wonderful majesty to a whale. It's a presence that is unknown on this planet. There's no other animal that has that enormous, silent, and absolutely graceful presence.
Whale Quest is a chance for local researchers and supporters to present to the community what we're doing and what we're learning in their backyard. And it's a chance for the community to support research that's important. If we don't know about the animals, then the pictures don't mean anything. If you don't know about the animals, then you can't do education. If you don't know about the animals, you can't make good conservation decisions. And so there's a tie between the research, the story, the presentation, and education. No one part works without the other.
During Whale Quest, Flip Nicklin, David Dubélé, and other participants also get to become whale-watching tourists.
Calf's gonna come up right here. Here comes the calf. Here she comes, right here. Whale watching and whale tourism like this, these animals are completely relaxed. They're playing around the boat. You know, you've got a captain that knows what the heck he's doing with the whole thing. And how can you beat this? You know, it's wonderful. It'll change everybody on this boat and what their attitudes are towards the humpback whale. That's a tremendous positive thing.
Images have become really the way that our society preserves memories, and for photographers like myself, like Flip, like David, are there whales behind me? We have been charged with documenting the changing of our planet and to maybe keep a record of what's happening. Photographers are really some of the people that are in the front lines of conservation.
While Hawaii's and other Pacific whale species are heavily protected, humpbacks in other regions are not so lucky. This calf is now large enough and strong enough to make the arduous journey south from the warm waters of Tonga to the frigid seas of Antarctica. The future of these whales is uncertain. There are now less than 800 humpbacks in Tongan waters, and if commercial whaling resumes, they will be on the front lines of the hunt. The sheltered waters of the South Pacific nation of Tonga have been important breeding grounds for humpback whales for millennia. These islands used to teem with the animals, maybe 10,000 or more, before modern whaling. Only about 250 survived the whaling era. Many nations participated in the slaughter. KGB documents revealed that Russian whaling ships illegally killed more than 48,000 whales in the Southern Pacific in just 2 decades. The former king of Tonga was so concerned with the welfare of the country's remaining whales that he implemented a complete prohibition on whaling in the late 70s. In the past few decades, Tonga's humpbacks have recovered slightly to perhaps 700 or 800 animals. But Tonga's, Fiji's, and Australia's humpback whales all migrate to Antarctica to feed.
2 years ago in St. Kitts at the International Whaling Commission meeting, the pro-whaling nations held a majority. And the current situation with Japanese and whaling is that they have a scientific research program where they announced they were going to take 935 minke whales, 50 fin whales, and 50 humpback whales. Humpback whales are endangered or threatened depending on the population you're looking at. And this happened to be a population that migrated past the coast of Australia. Through pressure by Australia and possibly some sort of backroom discussions with the United States, Japan withdrew its quota of 50 humpback whales, focusing on the 935 minke whales and the 50 fin whales.
2 years ago, the Japanese announced that they were going to be targeting humpback whales, and I think really that they did this in order to put it on the table so they could always withdraw it to get what they wanted. They wanted a higher quota of minke whales and fin whales. And every time they feel like they're not getting their way, they throw them back on the table. They're going to be doing this again this year. The humpback has really been the bargaining chip that they've been using to get their way down in Antarctica.
The Japanese argue that there are more than enough minke whales to sustain a well-managed whaling industry. Critics argue that even considering legalizing commercial whaling may open the floodgates to an all-out slaughter. A new legal whaling industry would likely spawn illegal pirate operations that would make no distinction between species, endangered or not. But to resume whaling, the moratorium would first have to be lifted.
The Japanese are courting countries like Tonga and Mongolia and Chad and St. Lucia, any country that they can get that will vote their way. It's a real fear that, of course, Tonga would sell out to the Japanese, just like, Mongolia is now a part of the International Whaling Commission, even though they don't have an ocean, but Japan pays all of their expenses. Japan's an economic bully, and it gets in there and says, okay, we're going to cut trade agreements with you if you don't do what we want. I'm not really concerned about it too much because Japan's not going to get a 2/3 majority at the International Whaling Commission. They're just not going to do it. And that's the only way they're going to overturn that moratorium is with a 2/3 majority.
Japan is an island nation and they see the world in a different way. They traditionally have gotten a huge proportion of their food from the ocean. I can understand their position that, they need to feed themselves and they have a right to feed themselves. However, with whaling, it's not simply a matter of numbers. If there's 500,000 whales, we can go out and kill a certain proportion of them. It is how that 500,000 whales are distributed in the ocean, how isolated they are from one another. There's a lot of questions there that need to be answered before you can scientifically say that you can sustainably harvest that population. The idea of harvesting a natural resource is, can you do it, which is a scientific question, and should you do it, which is a moral, ethical question. And I don't think the science part has been answered yet. The moral and ethical part of that equation, I think, is always going to be a bone of contention between pro-whalers and anti-whalers.
The growth of whale-watching tourism has been spectacular. It now occurs in almost 100 countries. It's estimated to generate in excess of $1 billion each year. And even minke whales are popular tourist attractions.
Whale watching is the ultimate sustainable industry. You're not doing anything to harm the whales. You can keep people going out and seeing whales year after year after year. It brings money into local economies. These small South Pacific islands, Tonga, for example, I would love to go to Tonga to go whale watching, and I know a lot of my friends would. But the idea that these whales are also being hunted would make me less apt to go to a country like that to go whale watching.
This year, the Japanese again announced a self-awarded quota of 50 humpback whales. And yet again, they canceled the plans after closed-door negotiations at the International Whaling Commission. Can whale-watching tourism help save humpbacks and other whales? Perhaps. For now, humpbacks are still protected, but it may be just a matter of time before the whaling moratorium is lifted.
Seals, sea lions, and walruses are pinnipeds, a family whose Latin name means wing or fin-footed. Carnivorous marine mammals, they spend much of their lives at sea, but rest, mate, and rear their young on land. Surprisingly, their closest relatives are bears. 33 diverse species of pinnipeds scratch out a living in some of Earth's most hostile environments. And there's no shortage of predators with a taste for seal meat. Around the globe, many pinniped populations are growing, while others are crashing. These wild fluctuations in numbers remain a mystery. At the Open Ocean Research Center, specially trained sea lions help scientists investigate the animal's energy requirements and diving physiology. In Vancouver's Marine Mammal Rescue Center, abandoned and injured harbor seals are nursed back to health and released into the wild. At the University of British Columbia, researchers study many facets of pinniped biology. You can learn a lot about animals from what they eat and what they excrete. Remarkably intelligent and easily trained, seals and sea lions are popular attractions at marine parks and aquariums. And like pinnipeds in the wild, these guys certainly love a big meal. On Canada's west coast, a dedicated team of professionals work together to learn more about an intriguing group of animals. Pinnipeds, more commonly known as seals and sea lions. Veterinarians, scientists, biologists, and students from the Vancouver Aquarium and University of British Columbia are trying to answer several puzzling questions surrounding pinnipeds. they also hope to unlock two great marine mysteries. Why are stellar sea lions thriving in Canadian waters, while in northern Alaska and Russia, their numbers are falling at an unprecedented rate? And why are northern fur seal populations crashing in the Bering Sea? At the UBC Open Water Research Station, highly trained sea lions provide researchers with new insights into pinniped behavior and biology. Fresh seafood is the animal's prime motivator and a key training tool. Gaining their trust and cooperation is challenging work. They just need a little incentive.
Stellar sea lions in the wild eat quite a bit of herring. When the herring comes in to lay eggs and stuff, there's a lot of it around. They'll definitely eat as much of it as they can. Herring is a very high-fat fish, so it's very calorically dense. It's got a lot of energy. Keeps the animals at a good, healthy weight. So right now, these animals are eating between 5 and 8 kilograms of herring a day. We supplement the herring with the vitamins in order to replace the nutrients that get lost in the freezing process.
Unlike dogs that are trained with food and praise, sea lions are all about the treats.
Sea lions are very food-motivated animals, so we use herring as their primary reinforcer to get them to do the research that we need them to do. If you walk out there and ask them to do something without a bucket of fish, they give you a look that says, where's my fish? And they won't actually do anything. But when they see the fish, they're ready to go and they'll do anything we ask them.
It's first thing in the morning, and the sea lions have a heavy day of in-water training.
Sika!
Nothing gets their attention like a bucket of fresh herring.
And Sika's here has got a really cool vocalization. Okay, Sika, let's put your harness on, because we can attach all sorts of different equipment to the harness, and that way we can find out what's going on with the animals, how much energy they use, how they swim, all sorts of cool information. This device here is called a VHF tag, and this transmits a radio signal, so we know where Sika is, and we can track her wherever she goes. So these are a couple other cool pieces of research equipment that we use. This is called an accelerometer, and it tells us how she swims. This device here is called a time depth recorder. So this tells how deep she swims. It'll actually give us water temperature. We have a camera here that we can mount onto the harness of the sea lions, and that way the animals can actually take their own video footage, and we can see really what the animals are doing when they're out in the wild and we can't see them. She's really a wild animal, and Sika has all of those wild tendencies. We work very closely with these guys to be able to have them used to us and used to other people around, but it takes a lot of time and patience to get to that point. Good girl, Sika.
The first training exercises of the day are swim tests. The animals are always eager to venture into the open sea.
Ready for a swim? Okay, let's go. In the water. Good, Sika. Right here. So when I have Sika swimming along the boat here like this, when I put my hand down, it means for her to go dive underwater and swim next to the boat. And she'll stay down there for a short period of time, about 30 seconds, even up to a minute sometimes. And then if I raise my hand up, it means for her to surface, and that means I'm going to give her reinforcement. And that's what we call a bridge. And a bridge tells the animals when they've done the behavior that we've looked for.
The seals and sea lions have got different ways to swim. The seals use their hind flippers. They rely on a lot of blubber to stay warm, whereas the sea lions and fur seals are using their front flippers. It turns out to be not the most efficient way to swim. What we've learned here is that they're not great divers. we're really surprised to realize just that the average dive time is only about 3 minutes max. And that turns out to be an efficient way that they can dive continuously over and over.
There, guys. Right there.
New technology has been instrumental in many recent breakthroughs at the research station. Some of these advances come from surprising sources.
The electrical engineers, and largely through the cell phone industry, have gone far faster and far further than what the biologists have been able to keep up with. We can now record data 16 times per second. We've got three-dimensional accelerometers that measure forwards, upwards, sideways, magnetometers, now even gyroscopes. So one of the things we've been doing here is applying these brand new technologies for the first time. From that, we can know exactly where they've gone in the ocean, where they've dived to, how long they've stayed down, and for the first time truly understand what the animals are doing when we can't see them underwater.
One of the things that we do with the animals as a really big reward when they've done a great job, and Sika's done a great job today, we like to give them a treat, and that's important. Everybody likes to get treats sometimes. So now a treat for a sea lion like this is a big salmon. So that's what I got here, and Sika sees it. So there's a big salmon for Sika. Now she's a pretty big animal, and she can eat a pretty big salmon. Now that is a treat.
The open water research station has been the jewel in our crown. It's the most novel thing that anybody's attempted. No one thought it was possible to train stellar sea lions to begin with, but then to go that next step and say, well, now we're going to open the door, let them go swim and do what they want. People said they're just going to disappear.
There you go, Bonnie. Dome.
But we had confidence in the trainers, and they came up with a system, and it's worked beautifully. And now literally it's like taking your dog out for a walk and taking it off leash. And they're doing these incredible things that no one ever thought would be possible.
Good girl, Bonnie. Good girl.
Bonnie is resting inside our metabolic dome. We're trying to get a baseline measurement. We want to know how many calories does she burn just to rest and float in the ocean. Air is being drawn through this tube, circulated, and continues through, is being sampled by our CO2 and oxygen analyzer inside the Stellar Pilot. And in just a couple minutes, we can now start making her work for her food. And for that, we're going to find out how many calories does it cost a sea lion to go down to depth to find its food, eat it, and come back to the surface.
So we're just pumping the fish down in order to send it down 10 meters to the sea lion so that she can forage for the fish at the bottom of the tubes.
Are we good to go? Good.
The animal is swimming, it's diving, it's coming back to the surface. It's doing what a sea lion would do naturally. What we're doing as scientists is we are sampling all the air that it's breathing. We're sucking it through the tubes, through our analyzers, and it's all ending up here on our laptop computer. This is the data we need.
The analyzers are reading the oxygen concentration and carbon dioxide concentration that is being produced inside the dome. So that's telling us how much oxygen is being consumed by Bonnie and how much carbon dioxide she's producing after every dive.
We can now do some back calculations to convert that into calories. So now we know how many calories do the animals spend to dive to different depths and to spend different amounts of time underwater.
Pinnipeds are generally very trainable animals, but like many species, they have their difficult moments. Usually, though, they're a delight to work with and a favorite of many trainers.
Stellars are a fantastic animal to train. They're very stubborn, and they can test you. They make life interesting. They keep you on your toes, for sure. Give me a kiss. Good. Does she love me? No. She just loves the fish that I give her for doing what I ask her to do. Good girl, man. Good girl. All right, go home. Good girl, Bonnie. So this behavior, going back in the cage to go home, is probably the most important behavior these animals do. So this one is always reinforced heavily.
The animals are giving us an enormous wealth of data, things that no one ever thought would be possible to do. No one has ever tried to train stellar sea lions to do the types of things that they're doing here. We're now getting into the heads and the minds of the sea lions. We now understand what motivates them, what their limitations are, and now we can take this data and now reflect back on what we've been observing in the wild to, for the first time, I think, understand what's driving that system and why stellar sea lions are in trouble in Alaska.
It's the end of another research day, and time to head back to the facility's holding pens. The sea lions, of course, always have the option to simply run, or rather swim away, to the open ocean. But they never do. Hazy, Sitka, and Bonnie like to have one last treat before retiring for the evening. Harbor police sometimes drop off large salmon confiscated from poachers. And when whole salmon is the entree, there's a palpable excitement in the air.
Good girl.
Sometimes, though, a large fish doesn't quite go down on the first try.
Back to Carolyn. Wasn't happy with the way it went down the first time. Got it?
These remote Alaskan beaches were once crowded with northern fur seals and stellar sea lions. Now the beaches are mostly barren. Millions of fur seals once congregated on these shores.
The Pinniped Islands of Alaska are located in the middle of the Bering Sea. It's like two floating aircraft carriers. And that is the home base for thousands of seabirds and at one point 3 million northern fur seals. That was the mother lode. There's regions of the coastline as you go from California up into southeast Alaska where we're seeing almost exponential growth of elephant seals, harbor seals, California sea lions, stellar sea lions. As you go further north through the Gulf of Alaska all the way over to Russia, northern Japan, they've collapsed. It's been this roller coaster dive. Over 80% of these populations have just disappeared. The curious thing has been that they've disappeared under our watch. We have all this modern technology and we're left scratching our heads and there's no bodies. We don't know where they've gone, what's happened to them.
Dr. Andrew Treitz is one of the world's foremost authorities on pinnipeds. He heads the Marine Mammal Research Unit at the University of British Columbia.
A lot of our focus has been on why are the sea lions declining and why are the fur seals declining in Alaska. And a lot of people think that it's tied into the types of fish that they're eating. So we've brought fish from Alaska to our lab here, and we're trying to find out just how good is this fish? How many calories does it have? Does it have enough to make a sea lion healthy? We need to know a couple things about the fish. Is it a sea lion eating size? How old is the fish?
And to find out how old fish are, you simply have to dissect their heads, locate and remove their ear bones.
Just like on a tree, I've got annual growth rings. If we section that, we can count the rings to know how old the fish is. And finally, we're going to take the fish and grind it up just as though it's ended up in a sea lion's stomach. And we'll take a sample of that and put it into the bomb calorimeter ultimately, and we're going to burn that to see how many calories does that whole fish have. Just as we would determine how many calories are in the food that we eat, we're using the same techniques to determine how many calories are in the food that seals and sea lions eat. A lot of what we know about the nutrition of fish is about for humans, where we just look at the fillets. But of course, the sea lion doesn't eat the fillets, they eat the whole fish. So we have to do a full body workup.
What they eat, how much they eat, and other nutrition data is crucial to understanding pinnipeds. But some of the scientists' most valuable research tools are the animal's feces.
When you're working with poop, you gotta make sure you glove up. You can find so much information from poop, it's not even funny. although it's a little bit funny, as most people find out. But you can find hard parts, which would be the undigestible bones that animals are eating. We can find their stress hormone levels from subsampling it from that. We can now use new techniques for getting genetics so we can find out what they're eating as well and compare it with those bones that we pull out. Poop may very well be our most important scientific tool.
What most people don't realize is just how much information is contained within a poop sample, or what we call scats. These scat samples, which just looks like waste lying on the rocks, contains an incredible amount of information that helps us unlock the mystery of the animals' lives.
What I'm doing right now is I'm separating the hard parts in the harbor seal scats from what we call the matrix material, which is essentially the stinky part of the scat. We're trying to quantify the proportions of different species of prey DNA. What we're trying to do now is go the next step further and go beyond just identifying what's there to actually quantifying the proportions. You really can learn a lot from what comes out of the back end of an animal.
What we have here is a CSI lab dedicated to solving mysteries about seals and sea lions. Universities are often at the forefront of new ideas. You've got some of the brightest, youngest minds thinking outside the box, and so we're able to combine skills from engineering, statistics, food and nutritional sciences. We're able to work across disciplines and do things in quite novel ways and come up with new techniques and original new ideas and insights into things that others may have missed completely.
At the Vancouver Aquarium, some of the star attractions are pinnipeds. But these animals are not just performers, they're research partners. Stellar sea lions and northern fur seals are key participants in ongoing studies into why the animals are disappearing in Alaska and Russia.
Northern fur seals are just one of the calmest animals I've worked. And, there's very little nervousness in most cases. Good. Eat. So right now I am just measuring Ani. So I'm measuring her from the tip of her nose right to her tail. But while doing this, we want to keep it very positive. So I'm just feeding her throughout.
Love her haircut.
Good girl. Good girl. See? Good. Left. Good. Open. Very good. Northern fur seals are an amazing animal to work. Training these guys is not too different than training a puppy. You start very, very small. Their attention is going to be a lot smaller than an adult animal, of course. So we start very, very small with a lot of reinforcement. Cuckoo, on the scale. This is one of the metabolic chambers, and we practice placing them in and out pretty much every single day. And maybe once every couple of weeks to every couple of months, depending on the study, we will have them in there for a certain amount of time, usually about between 60 to 80 minutes, and it measures her resting metabolic rate. Pretty much all the animals that are here, I've raised from pups, so there's definitely a relationship between myself and the animals that are here at the aquarium and at our open water site.
We brought fur seals from Alaska, from the Pinniped Islands to the Vancouver Aquarium to help solve some of the missing pieces of their life cycle. We don't know, for example, how much food do they require? Are they getting enough to eat? We don't know anything about their growth curves. We measure their lengths, their weights, to understand what time of the year do they need more food, what time of the year do they need less. These animals are helping us solve an incredible ecological mystery that not only touches the Bering Sea, but the entire North Pacific Ocean.
And on the far side of the habitat, we will soon...
As a researcher, I've got lots of ideas of things we could do, but I'm not an animal trainer. I'm not a vet. What I realized early on is that nobody makes progress as a researcher alone. It's only by working with others. What the aquarium offers is they already have a proven expertise in caring for animals. They're phenomenal at training. And I also recognize that it's expensive. People don't appreciate what the cost is to care for animals, the amount of individual attention one animal requires.
And admission fees at aquariums help fund important research.
once again. My name is Kirsten, giving you a wave right here on the Wild Coast, just opposite to that green tent. Thanks for waving back. And I'm wondering, how many of you are excited for the 12 o'clock Seal and Sea Lion show? Fantastic. Just the enthusiasm I was expecting, because we're going to be learning about these incredible marine mammals. Not only...
To succeed at this, you need partnerships. And so we have a partnership with the Vancouver Aquarium. And they provide all the husbandry and training expertise, care of the animals. And from the university, we're providing the researchers, the ideas, and the hypothesis tests. But in the end, it's a collaboration of ideas.
So on behalf of myself, the trainers, and the incredible marine mammals, we all wish you a fantastic rest of your day at the Vancouver Aquarium. Thanks so much for coming out.
After the performances, there's still work to do, especially with the stellar sea lions and fur seals.
Right down. That's good.
And like their counterparts at the Open Ocean Research Center, aquarium animals also need a fishy incentive.
Yeah, these animals are very food motivated. Fastest way to their heart is through their stomachs, that's for sure.
Training is not the only important facet to pinniped life at the aquarium. Keeping the animals fit, both in mind and body, is a top priority for the staff.
They do get a lot of natural exercise in the wild, so we like to stimulate that here with higher energy leaps and jumps and just general higher energy behaviors. It's also a lot of fun for them to do as well. So we give them toys and things to play with on a regular basis, and we try to mix it up as much as possible to keep it varied. Stellar sea lions are amazing animals to work with. I mean, to be able to have the relationship that we have with these animals and work with them day in and day out, it's definitely a pleasure. They all have individual personalities, and they all have different strengths and weaknesses, and us kind of having to work with them keeps us on our toes, and it's just really a lot of fun to be able to communicate with an animal and have such a strong working relationship with them.
All the animals at the aquarium require extensive veterinary care. It's a team effort to keep all the pinnipeds healthy.
My job as the veterinarian at the Vancouver Aquarium is basically to maintain the animals in our collection in the best health possible. So a large part of my job is designing a health management program for each of the species that we deal with, and that becomes very, very individualized, especially for the marine mammals. We do have animals living a lot longer than they would in the wild, for example. So we have a lot of these sort of old age problems to contend with. Very old sea lions might develop cataracts. We have potentially some arthritic issues in old sea lions. Certainly dental problems become an issue as any organism ages. Some of our old animals have come up with cancers as they've aged. So it sort of becomes a sort of geriatric medicine. I've been working with pinnipeds in particular for close to about 25 years now, and every day I still find something new that's absolutely fascinating about the species. And honestly, I have got the coolest animals in the whole world to work with, and I was fascinated by marine mammals as early as age 7, and that's never left me.
Harbor seal mothers often leave their pups on shore unattended when they head out to feed. Baby animals are sometimes then abandoned or injured. Many of them are eventually brought to the Vancouver Aquarium Marine Mammal Rescue Center.
Right now, Janelle is doing a physical exam on this little girl, Peyton, who came in yesterday. We do an exam on every animal when they first come in. So we check all the body systems just to make sure that everything's okay and check and see if there's any wounds, that kind of thing.
All teeth are erupted?
We start at the tip of the nose and work our way down to the tail. So check all the sensory organs, eyes, ears, mouth, nose, teeth, gums, heart, lungs, gastrointestinal system, musculoskeletal system, an estimate on how old we think they are, and attitude-wise, so she's obviously pretty bright and alert. The majority of the animals that come into our center are harbor seals, and a lot of them are neonates, so they're less than a week old when they first come into our center. For the most part, the harbor seals are separated from their mothers for whatever reason that is. Other species of pinnipeds could be disentanglements that we brought them in for. Some of them are emaciated for other reasons, so each case is different.
The younger pups are briefly fed a special formula to simulate their mother's rich milk. As soon as possible, though, the animals are introduced to fish, the nutritious food they will need to survive in the wild.
Herring's a pretty high-fat fish, so for these guys, when they're just weaning onto fish, we want them to gain lots of weight and get a good layer of blubber on them before they get released.
So this is Saturn.
So once the animals are strong enough at a certain weight, then we're able to actually start fish schooling them. So what that means is that we will offer them herring. Some of the guys, it takes a little bit longer to learn how to actually fish school and catch the fish.
Even chasing a dead herring is critical training these marine mammals will need when they are eventually released. It still requires a bit of practice.
Normally we go the other way?
Normally they go head first, but never floats your boat.
Many of the pups brought to the rescue center are in reasonably good health. Most are just hungry and dehydrated. However, some have serious injuries or infections that need prompt attention. Veterinarian staff from the Vancouver Aquarium are brought in for exams and treatment when necessary. This pup, Beetlejuice, had an eye injury that might require surgery.
It's very much kind of a herd health approach to these guys. There's definitely an initial physical exam, and then as we notice other problems associated with their strandings, but we see secondary problems like a bad eye here on poor Beetlejuice, and we get a little bit more intensive with our exam and with our care. I think we have a very, very good success rate. Over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had really, really good success and going, 70 to 75% and now approaching 80% success. So that's actually phenomenal. He's a good boy.
It doesn't take long for the pups to regain their strength and to thrive. In a matter of weeks, they're nearly ready for release back into the wild.
These animals are pretty much ready for release. They've got about a week or 2 left in our center. Most of them are over 15 kilos, and we like them to be about 20 plus kilos for release. They're all competing really well for their food, and they're getting lots of conditioning time in the pool. No, we definitely like to make sure that they are healthy, that everything is running properly inside to give them the best chance of survival that we can while they're out there.
With so many animals flooding into the rescue center, it helps to assign them names.
Each year we have a naming theme. This year it's astronomy. It's a great opportunity for our volunteers and people that have helped us out with the rescues to name the animals. We don't call them by that name, but it's more of association so we can tell them apart on paper. You can definitely see a difference between a few of them. And a lot of them have a lot of different markings, different colorings, different facial expressions in general. So a few of them we can tell apart just by looking at them. It's a huge team effort here with our staff and our volunteers, and we would not be able to run this whole center without the help of our volunteers.
We need another lid for who? I need a lid for Steve. I volunteer here at Marine Mammal Rescue because I enjoy making a positive contribution to the environment. Seals perhaps are not the most endangered species, but they're an indicator species, so when we see them come in, we can see, oh, our environment's doing pretty well, and it's really fun to be able to say goodbye seal when they go back to the ocean.
Like sharks, dolphins, and other large aquatic animals, seals and sea lions now have an enthusiastic fan club. In many parts of the world, scuba divers and snorkelers can swim with the animals in their natural habitat. But some people question whether these close interactions might alter the behavior of wild pinnipeds.
Hornby Island Diving has been operating for over 40 years, a family-run business. My father started the business in the early 70s, and now my wife and myself, Amanda, operate the business. We've introduced many divers to sea lions over the years. When we have groups that come, we're very careful to give detailed briefings as to the etiquette in the water. When we're around the sea lions, we like to make sure we don't disturb the animals on shore. Resting is an important part of their daily activity, so we don't have any impact on that.
Marine mammals, especially orcas and other whales, are currently protected from disturbance by tourism activities. Whale watching in particular is a closely regulated industry. Some authorities now want to give seals and sea lions the same level of protection.
So the animals we're seeing here in this area are transient animals. They're here just feeding, and they are going to follow the herring in this area until it leaves the Strait of Georgia, and then they will head off to their respective breeding grounds, whether that's north or south from here. Most of the stellars we see are from the Oregon coast, so they will follow that herring back out of the Strait of Georgia and Juan de Fuca, and then will continue their journey home.
Canada's Department of Fisheries and Oceans, or DFO, has recently proposed new regulations restricting close approach to all marine mammals, including seals and sea lions. If enforced, these new rules will effectively kill this fledgling industry. Pinnipeds are intensely curious animals, and scuba divers clad in neoprene and sporting all kinds of interesting gadgets are impossible to resist.
So we just ask our groups are in the water, they keep them hands to themselves, just allow the animals to come to them. You know, it's the animal's choice to come to the diver. We don't ever allow groups to actively go after sea lions, but if the sea lion wishes to come and interact with the diver, that's their choice. They have their moods. Some days they're not interested in you in the least bit, and other days they're very interested. They want to test every piece of equipment you have. They're just like big dogs playing with you in the water. You know, they get very excited. Anything in the water, whether it be a diver or a stick floating by, they're just eager to interact with it and try and figure out what it is.
The question remains, does this type of interaction negatively impact the behavior and well-being of marine mammals, especially seals and sea lions? The jury is still out on the issue.
The interaction of scuba divers and sea lions does have some controversy. Some people in DFO believe that we're negatively impacting the behavior of the sea lions. We've done this for enough years that our philosophy of our business is, you know, we're very careful to how we interact with animals, and if we felt we were having a negative impact on the animals, we would change our operating procedures.
One sure thing, these playful sea lions seem to enjoy having the divers pay them a visit.
Okay, guys, welcome aboard the Juan de Fuca Warrior. We're heading out to Race Rocks. We're 9 miles right out into the middle of Juan de Fuca Strait, about a 15 or 20 minute run today. So welcome to Race Rocks, you guys. We're just entering the park. We're not allowed to anchor, tie up, be over the side of the boat, tied to the kelp, any of that sort of stuff in here. There is a speed limit in here for boats too. Vessels aren't allowed to go any more than 5 knots over ground. We call this out here, Race Rocks, the bachelor pad for the sea lions. These are all males. They've done their business and they're coming and relaxing on the rocks.
Julie Bowser is one of the island's student caretakers. She's happy to host some rare visitors on her remote outpost.
Thought we'd say hi before we go out for a dive.
Julie invited the divers onto the island for a quick tour before the team donned their scuba equipment. Race Rocks is a National Historic Site and a strictly protected ecological preserve. Situated in the Strait of Juan de Fuca, its rugged shores are battered by strong winds and tidal currents. It's an ideal resting spot and haul-out site for pinnipeds. Many of these animals are exhausted from long migrations along the coast.
He's on the move. He's on the move. Going right over top of the others.
The original 80-foot-tall lighthouse from 1860 still stands today. Massive granite blocks quarried in Scotland were shipped around Cape Horn to construct the tower's base.
My job title is the Eco Guardian of the reserve, so my job is to try and keep the place as natural as it can be for the species out here. Mainly my job is to watch out for the boats out here, so whale watchers that come in and get too close or speed through the reserve, and they act as a disturbance to the whales and the sea lions and the seals.
Race Rocks is also an important bird sanctuary. At certain times of the year, the island is packed with nesting seabirds. The star attractions, though, are the seals and sea lions.
I mean, we've been coming here for probably 30 years or so. I mean, the sea lions are usually here all the time, although the numbers change throughout the year as they move around. I mean, there aren't so many right now. I mean, at this time of year, their numbers are fairly low, but at certain times of year, there'll be hundreds and hundreds of them here.
Unlike at Hornby Island, the California and Stellar sea lions at Race Rocks weren't so eager to join the divers. The level of interaction on any given dive is entirely up to the seals and sea lions.
Well, when we first got in, it was pretty slim pickings. They weren't too active, so we went right up against the rocks, popped our heads up a couple of times, and they're all just lying there soaking up the sun. They weren't interested in coming and playing. And then all of a sudden, big California came in and gave us a good flyby. I mean, you got to remember, these animals, a big male's about 2,000 pounds plus, and if he wanted to do damage to you, it certainly could. I mean, they're big animals, so you have to be careful.
Depending on how things progress with Canada's Department of Fisheries and Oceans' new policies, this type of diving tourism may become a thing of the past. Globally, most species of pinnipeds are generally thriving. The Marine Mammal Protection Act of the early 70s effectively ended commercial exploitation of seals and sea lions, and their numbers have rebounded.
Some of the most visible components of the marine ecosystem are the seals and sea lions. Because they haul out, we can count them. If we see change in the numbers, that tells us something's going on. Pinnipeds are like the canary in the coal mine. It's an early warning indicator. If you see the seals and sea lions declining, it's telling you something's not right. The declines in the Gulf of Alaska, Aleutian Islands, Russian waters, they all began in the late 1970s. It coincides with a buildup of fishing. So I thought, as most people thought, well, that's pretty obvious then, isn't it? Except that we couldn't find any connection between where the fish was operated, the amounts of fish caught, the rates of decline, nothing added up. That then led us into looking at alternative explanations. We then ended up with a second hypothesis. The first was that fishing had depleted the prey, and so there was less quantity. The other was that, in fact, the quantity had increased, but what was different is that the quality had changed. The diet of the sea lions in the past was not cod and pollock. They were eating in the past the oilier, fattier fishes. It was thought, well, maybe there's something nutritionally wrong with this fish. It became known as the junk food hypothesis, which was they were eating too much of low-quality food. In hindsight, it probably should have been called the Nutri-Light hypothesis or the low-cal hypothesis, because what seems to have happened is there seems to be a lot of prey for them to eat, but it's low energy. So it's effectively like people trying to live in a field of celery. There's a huge biomass there, there's all kinds to eat, but you keep eating and you'll be full and still hungry before you've ever gotten enough to meet your needs. So that was one of the hypotheses that we tested with our captive seals and sea lions. We fed them fish that they used to eat in the past, and we realized that they were very happy and content. But when we put them onto a diet of pollock, what they're currently eating, we discovered a really surprising thing, which was that the young animals were getting full before they'd eaten enough. It was one of those moments where you go, of course an animal can get full, but all of us have been thinking marine mammals are just gluttons. They never get satiated. They just eat and eat and eat. No, they're like people. They can get full, and if you're a young animal and you fill your stomach with low energy fish, you're not going to make it.
At one time, seals and sea lions were aggressively hunted for their lush pelts. Many pinnipeds were considered threats to commercial fishing and were slaughtered simply to reduce their populations. But now, the animals are protected and their numbers are on the rise, except in the far northern Pacific.
With pinnipeds, we've now scratched below the surface and we're going deeper and deeper with it. They literally have been our eyes and ears into an entire ecosystem. They're showing us things that we never knew about. They're making us realize how complex it is and also how careful we need to be about not tipping that balance further.
This serene, slow-moving, and strange-looking animal is a manatee. And this handsome fellow is its close relative, the dugong. They're air-breathing herbivores, the only aquatic mammals that exclusively eat plants. And both of them are endangered species. Dugongs cling to survival in a few isolated corners of the globe. And with only a few thousand Florida manatees remaining in the wild, the clock is ticking in efforts to save these amazing creatures from extinction. In Central Florida, a diverse group of biologists and wildlife officials capture manatees for health exams, census counts, and genetic testing. But safely securing a wild animal that can weigh more than a ton can be a challenge. With some recent conservation success and a baby boom of sorts, manatees are being considered for delisting from the Endangered Species Act. But would the controversial move be far too premature? Like many iconic species, manatees and dugongs have unlikely advocates, eco-tourists, many of them children. Manatees and dugongs' closest relatives are elephants. With thick, leathery hides and coarse hair, they are essentially aquatic pachyderms with matching appetites. Their spindle-shaped bodies slim down to enormous tails. The main difference between the two species are that dugong's tails are fluke-shaped, like a whale or dolphin, and manatees are round and paddle-shaped. They are indeed some of nature's more eccentric creations. These are Florida manatees, a distinct subspecies of the West Indian manatee. They are intensely curious, don't move very fast, and, for better or for worse, habituated to the presence of people. can't go far in the Crystal River region of Central Florida without seeing a reference to manatees. They're even featured on license plates. But even though manatees are iconic animals, they're gravely threatened by a decades-long boom in wetland development and dramatic increases in human population. Each year, hundreds of manatees are killed in U.S. waters, mostly from boat strikes. Disease and cold weather also take a toll. 2006 was the worst year on record for manatee deaths. At least 416 perished. But things are looking up for manatees. The past few years has seen a baby boom. New births have helped to offset high mortality rates.
We really want to have a balance, and we certainly want to have more calves born every year than animals are killed each year. And as long as we have that positive growth, then we're going to see the rewards associated with that in the population overall over time. It's when you get more manatees killed in one year or you have births that you present a problem.
Today, biologist Dr. Bob Bondi is leading a massive effort to capture, examine, and release wild manatees. Animal health assessments are initiatives to help protect endangered manatees. And you need a lot of people to haul a 2,000-pound wild animal from the water. Representatives from local, state, and federal agencies are all on hand to help and to learn.
So we're going to basically go over some of the ground rules. We have a lot of people here. We have a lot of activity that's going to be going on. Hopefully we're going to have a lot of manatees. So why are we doing this? Why do we torment manatees and catch them? Well, this is a research project. USGS is instructed to come in and learn as much as we can about the health of the manatees in the Crystal River National Wildlife Refuge. Fish and Wildlife Service mandates this, so it's good for recovery purposes to know how well manatees are doing.
Manatees' preferred winter habitat is Central Florida, and a lot of people live here, and many have boats.
In Florida, when it gets cold, manatees look for warm water sites, and so the warmer the water, the better for these tropical manatees that are found in Florida and southeastern United States, the northern limit of their range. With all these people moving down into Florida and bringing their boats, there's a greater burden on the manatees that use the same waterways the boats do. And so it's only a matter of time before a manatee gets scarred. It's not just the swirling propeller that causes the problems. In fact, only in 40% of the implicated deaths that are associated with watercraft mortality. In the other 60%, it's impact trauma. So you actually have boats that are going so fast through the water that they just come in and hit and cause damage to manatees. It's often lethal.
In nearby Crystal River Wildlife Refuge, the team prepares their equipment and clears the beach of rocks and debris.
We're going to be supplying medical support and health support for the animals that are brought up, which means we'll be looking at their respiratory rates, we'll be looking at their heart rates, we'll be taking blood samples, we'll be checking areas of the blood that'll help us determine whether that animal is not getting enough oxygen.
For those participants who've never experienced a manatee capture, it's a thrilling introduction to one of Florida's most revered species.
We're looking for single animals so we don't set on too many. And so the manatee goes into the net as it's swimming out. And you can see the footprint in the water right here as it goes into the middle of the net.
We can use that boat to deploy the net and a horseshoe around the manatee and then basically draw the manatee to shore. The net has a lead line and a float line. The lead line kind of digs up the bottom and the float line stays on top, and we bag the animal up before it's pulled to shore. The hull design is a mullet skiff design the old mullet fishermen in Florida used to use, and we've modified it to our own needs by having a removable transom, and we took out a bulkhead. So now we're able to totally set a net all the way around a manatee.
Once the net is set, all hands are needed on the beach to wrangle the animal to shore.
Stop with the floats. Bring the floats this way now. Open it up. You're okay, just let that stay down. Okay, step back with the float, open it up a little bit. Yeah, that's fine, that's good. Okay, slow down on the float.
Floats a little bit. Floats, bag it.
Let's, floats only, floats only.
Bag it. That corner right there, bag it. Right bag? Yep. Spin the head towards the beach. The head's going up, ready? Head side pulling, tail's pulling. 1, 2, 3. All right, everybody
Perch us up a little more.
Are ready? Yep. 1, 2, 3.
All right, beautiful. It is a team effort because we're manhandling an elephant-sized animal. It takes a lot of people to pick up an elephant and tote it around. Now, an elephant you can train to walk over here and plop down and take your blood sample. A manatee's taken out of the water, it's got to be carried. So it takes a bunch of us. The tail, just a little weight on the body.
Oh, that was fast.
That's it.
Your hands on the animal, though.
Yeah. You saw that one?
Yep. Okay, we're going to roll the animal to on its right side. And we're going to tuck the net and tuck the stretcher, okay? All right, everybody ready? We're going right onto the foam. 1, 2, 3. Jimmy, stop.
That's good.
Hands on the animal. All right, it's all yours.
Thanks. Good job. Once again, good job.
The first animal caught had distinct scarring from a boat strike.
What are you doing there, Bob?
Well, we're just documenting the scar pattern. So you can see that the skeg mark is on the bottom half of this animal, and the propeller, as it swirled, ended up hitting the back and caused this really distinct scar. So what this enables us to do is keep an identity for this individual so we can follow it over time, and we'll be able to monitor its survival from one year to the next.
The first manatee capture was a success and a valuable learning experience.
It's a male.
But it took too long. The team will have to speed up the process.
Coming down slow.
It's a huge task to organize so many people and resources. It takes time, and they have just 2 days to complete their work. The animals are generally not happy to be captured in nets and hauled on shore, and some protest a little more strongly than others.
Floats in, bag it, bag it, bag it.
Most of the manatees put up quite a struggle, and light as a feather, they're not.
They're heavy and they get bigger. These guys have been in kind of the bigger range, but they can definitely tip the scales even heavier. We rescued one back in March of 2007 in Daytona Beach. It was 2,700 pounds, and that was a large animal to catch. That's why you can see out here today, it takes a lot of people, a lot of coordinated efforts to get these guys safely caught on shore, worked up, and then back in the water.
1, 2, 3.
This big male has never been captured and is unknown to the team.
I'm not sure he's in the catalog, so this will be a new cataloged animal. There's just mild scarring on his back. He has remnants of barnacle scars on his body, which means he's been out in the salt water a good portion of the season. So this may be a transient male that's moving through the area, which is unique and genetically will be very interesting for us to look at.
Right now we're just keeping an eye on the tail area. It's probably the most dangerous part of the animal. They have a lot of strength in their paddle, and so if the animal starts to roll or something, we want to make sure we can get weight on it really quickly.
Okay, now we're going to feed this underneath the hex and out in front of the head.
We're going to look at blood values, and we're going to see how healthy the animal is. We're going to look at the immunology. We want to know what the stress levels are in the animals. We want to try to make a composite picture of what's happened to this animal in the more recent history, but even over the long term. It's one giant puzzle with a bunch of different pieces that's going to put together the status and health and welfare of these animals that are out there.
I've got to tell you, the first thing you always want to do is scan the animal. You don't want to put more microchips.
A challenge facing Andy Garrett and the rest of the team is to positively identify each manatee and find out if the animal was previously captured. One of the key tools in their arsenal is a tiny electronic ID device called a pit tag.
Sticking. We insert microchips in case we ever catch the animal again. We know we've handled it before. In case it comes in rescued or dead, we know where we handled it before.
The manatees are first checked for existing pit tags. If none are found, the animal is prepared for a minor surgical procedure to insert the device.
Yeah, he's a head driver, so just be ready already.
Sticking.
The microchip itself is no larger than a grain of rice and is implanted with a modified syringe.
Sticking.
The pit tag is then registered in a database.
000696 C2 8E.
8E.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah.
How's he doing?
On shore, the manatees instinctively hold their breath, but under stress, their CO2 levels can rise dangerously high. The animals are induced to breathe by simply dousing them with water.
We want to encourage him to take breaths, and we want to give him oxygen. So we literally have an oxygen valve that we put right in front of his nose, and as he inhales, he takes up some of that oxygen, and it helps to keep that CO2 and oxygen balance pretty even.
Blood work is perhaps the most valuable part of the health exam. Like humans, manatee blood analysis reveals vital information about the animal's well-being.
Is there blood coming in?
Core samples are sent out to various labs for testing and cataloging. But with a new high-tech device, much of the work can be done on site.
We call it an iStat machine. It measures blood gas, and what that means is we can get a blood sample from the animal, and it gives us the pH, and it tells us their CO2 level, their oxygen level. It also tells us their lactate. Just literally takes a few drops.
A small tissue sample is cut from the tail for DNA analysis.
In this Crystal River greater population, we've collected over 700 cookie samples from manatees. So we have a really good representation genetically of the stock population.
2, 3.
A necessary and unenviable task is to collect urine and fecal samples. You can tell a lot about a manatee from what comes out of a manatee.
What we've got here is a fecal sample from the first male manatee that just got brought up on the shore. And my professor at UF uses these to look for hormone concentrations and sex steroids in the manatees. You can tell a lot from a fecal sample, apparently.
Right now we're doing the measurements, straight line, curvilinear, total length, and then we'll do some girths.
252 for straight line, and then ISCA, curvilinear.
Nearly all of the manatees captured and examined were exceptionally healthy. But one of the last animals to be caught appeared to have suffered serious trauma. It did not struggle in the nets at all. It was either injured, weak, or very sick. A boat strike likely caused severe scarring and internal injuries. Fresh, deep wounds were not a good sign. The team must now decide whether to evacuate the animal to a medical facility or to release it.
So we want to get his weight. We want to see if this injury is serious enough to have caused debilitation. And then we probably want to sample a couple of these little lesions on the body.
Well, this manatee was actually hit by a boat very recently, and in this area right here, we were actually noticing that there was some swelling.
Hey, Jen, what oral temperature?
And we're concerned that there might be some deep tissue swelling and also some bone involvement. So by putting an ultrasound probe on here, we're able to very quickly assess that there actually is deep tissue swelling here and possibly some bone involvement on the edge. Nothing that's so drastic that we might want to think that he immediately needs to go into rehabilitation, but it's something that we would want to monitor out in the wild over time.
One of the last orders of business in the manatee health exams was to weigh the animals.
A little bit. 1, 2, 3, up. Clear. Call it. Someone back there, call it.
16, 10, 15, 25. 16, 25.
Coming down.
After 2 days of intense work, the last of the manatees was examined and released. It was a very successful endeavor, and the team learned a great deal about Crystal River's wild manatee population.
So why do we do this? You know, why do we care that manatees are around? And I think it is real important. I think that I've been blessed with the opportunity to learn from manatees and to get out there in my research career to do this. I would love to pass it on to other researchers, but I'd also like to pass it on to my kids and their generation.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
You know, when I started 30 years ago, we were just writing the books about manatee biology. And though we've written some really interesting works, we've learned a lot about manatees, but there's new things right on the horizon. You know, these animals don't cease to amaze me.
Some rescued manatees are too severely injured to be released back into the wild. But how do you care for a really big aquatic animal with an even bigger appetite? If a manatee survives a boat strike or is incapacitated by disease or cold stress, Florida has a number of facilities which care for sick or injured animals. Homosassa Springs Wildlife State Park is one of a handful of centers in Florida that rehabilitates manatees and provides some of them with permanent homes. In captivity, the animals need intensive care and a lot of food.
Homosassa Springs Wildlife State Park is sort of an animal sanctuary. What we have are injured animals, animals that have nowhere else to go, and animals that have actually been confiscated in some cases. The manatees that are here, they probably couldn't survive on their own.
Volunteers and park staff get into the water each day with resident manatees.
Okay.
A mostly sedentary lifestyle and a rich diet has helped to push the manatees' weights a bit towards the hefty side.
These guys being captive animals, most of them have been captive animals, are brought in for rehab for a number of years, so they're not going through that annual migratory amount of effort they have to put in. They're also not going through the just having to look for your food on a daily basis. Of course, in the wild, they're not going to be eating a lot of sweet potatoes, but we need something that's a little bit of bribery, basically, to get them in and make sure we can get a good look at them every morning. No eating rope.
No rope.
This is Amanda, actually. Amanda's one of the injury cases that came in. As you can see here, she's got some really deep crop cuts, and those actually go all the way down along her side. Now, Amanda got caught in a lock system, and she got locked in with a boat. As they drained the water down, she was basically pinned up against the boat, bounced off of it, and into the side of the propeller. And this is Rosie. This is actually the largest animal. And you can see the scar on her head. That's the reason she's here. She took a direct strike across the top of her head. Last year, of course, was a real bad year for boat strikes. The propellers actually cause a lot of damage. The boat strikes themselves cause a lot of the deaths. All this tissue up here is lung. So when manatees are hit by a boat, you're cutting into the lungs. A chest full of water on a person, a manatee, any kind of mammal, it's a drowning. Here at Homosassa, we've got only female manatees, just because we don't allow captive breeding. Actually, captive breeding is not allowed anywhere. And the reason is female manatees spend several years raising their calves, teaching them pretty much where to go to get food, where to go to get water temperature, and also where to go to get fresh water. and that's not something we can teach them here. Manatee's closest land relative or closest genetic relative is the elephant. You do see some similarities. They do have that prehensile upper lip, which is basically just a shrunken down, modified version of an elephant's trunk. They also have the same toenails that elephants have. So you got those rounded off, not much good for digging or clawing, but they do have toenails on there. And they also nurse their young in the same place, which would be in the armpit area or the flipper pit area on a manatee. So there are quite a few similarities between the two.
At the park, rescued animals have many friends.
They're personable, they're gentle, they can be demanding. It's a very cool volunteer position. I've lived here full-time for 3 years now, and I've been at the park for about 2 years. So it's a really great, I never even heard of manatees till I got here.
I know there's one there.
Now they're about my favorite critter.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Cindy. I'm a volunteer here with the Florida Park Service.
The manatees at Homosassa Springs are very popular tourist attractions. And as long as the food keeps coming, the animals are happy to oblige appreciative audiences.
Ooh, yum. Come on. How you doing, girls? Okay, you guys. All right, getting my hair wet.
They are warm-blooded, air-breathing creatures that can exist only in warm waters.
A floating observatory at Homosassa provides a remarkable glimpse into the underwater realm of a Florida spring. And here, the manatees get their main meals for the day.
These guys will get romaine, they'll get kale, they'll get cabbage. Iceberg lettuce is basically green water, so we don't feed that. The romaine for them is probably one of their higher proteins. They'll get peppers, they'll get, depending on the day, kale, bok choy, bananas actually are one of their favorites, and they'll also get about 50 pounds of carrots a day.
Keeping the park's manatees healthy and well-fed is a never-ending chore.
Our manatees here at the park eat a lot of food 4 times a day, so this is pretty much an all-day event every single day of the year. So a lot of the research as far as manatee diets and what their dietary needs are comes from research with actually elephants, being that elephants have been captive a lot longer than manatees actually, so they know a lot more about the nutritional needs of elephants. Manatees, even though they're called sea cows, internally they're basically horses. So they're similar to another animal that we know a lot more about.
In the wild, active manatees eat even more food. They can ingest hundreds of pounds of vegetation daily, up to 10% of their body weight.
They do offer us a service. We're out there with these same boats that run them over. We like to keep the waterways clean. Manatees feed on the plants. They're grazers, and they're doing us a public service by keeping waterways clear.
The big thing with manatees, they're the only marine herbivore. So if you take an animal that's doing something like that, which is removing plants from an ecosystem on a natural basis, if you take those completely out of the equation, what you're going to get is massive overgrowth of lots of plants and choked off rivers and waterways. And we really don't know exactly what the impact of the amount of plant life they take out of the ecosystem is. If they were gone completely, we might never know how well they manage this ecosystem.
For a more hands-on approach to manatee ecotourism, you can snorkel with the animals in the wild. They crave attention and a good belly scratch. It's the middle of winter, it's cold, and it's way too early. But still, hundreds of bleary-eyed tourists, many of them children, descend on Crystal River and other waterways where manatees live. They come to see and interact with manatees in their natural habitat.
Okay, take 3 more over here, guys.
The best time is the morning time to see the manatees. That's when we get the best interaction out of the manatees. Later in the afternoon, they start feeding. They could care less about us, so we want to get out there early. Let's go over a couple of rules that we went over yesterday, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Want to be as quiet as possible, right? That is the most important thing. It's cold out there this morning, so the manatees should be plentiful. They like to be scratched on their belly underneath their flippers. Stay completely on the surface. The manatees have to come to us. If we go diving down and there's a manatee on the bottom, he's either sleeping or feeding. We don't want to mess with him. Typical weekend. Lots of people, lots of kids. Gets a little crowded, yes. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? That's a debate that could go forever. In my opinion, it's a good thing. It's getting education to our youth, and that's what we need to do. It's just going to go a long ways in protecting the species.
There's more awareness, and the awareness is taking place in this younger generation. And these are the people that are going to be responsible for taking good care of not only us when we get older, but the manatees that are out there. So it's very encouraging that young people get interested in this stuff. This water environment that we have around us is almost as alien as another planet, and it shouldn't be. We've got animals the size of elephants 10 feet away from us, wandering along the shore. We don't see them because they're under the water. So I think anybody that gets in the water, swims with manatees, sees them in that natural environment, comes out a better person for that experience.
The manatees are almost like cows and dogs crossed together underwater. Yeah, and then like when you try and pet them, they'll roll over like a dog so you can scratch their belly.
When you pet them, they're really rough and they don't feel all that great.
They feel like algae. Like
yeah.
slimy, like
they have that like algae layer.
Yeah, like
on
shells
the top.
and algae
Yeah.
and like slimy, scaly.
It's nasty.
Like the calves make these really high-pitched noises.
Yeah.
Squeals. And it's kind of like
It's like a giant kindergarten class gone mad in the pool. It was a lot of fun. It's just an incredible feeling when you're in the water with 212-year-olds. Manatees swim over and they roll over in their belly, and the kids rub their belly just like a big pet dog, eh? And you can hear the kids giggling underwater. It's a great experience. Every school should bring kids down to something like this.
Did everybody have a good time? Yeah! Lots of manatees? Oh yeah. How many would you say you saw?
Ecotourism of this sort could be a very powerful source of conservation. Most of the visitors who come to this refuge are children. And children are exposed to the tri-dimensional world of a manatee, and they do see how manatees behave and move underwater, and they gain a better appreciation. Sometimes they use the word love, that they end up loving these animals.
Ivan Vicente is just one of a handful of wildlife officials charged with protecting manatees. Some in the conservation community feel that manatee tourism, especially the widely condoned practice of touching the animals, has gone a bit too far.
That's why we try to encourage passive observation, so that when people are in the water, they try to establish some distance so that they can view from a distance and have more quality experience when swimming with a manatee. We just want to get away from a petting zoo concept or a park. So wildlife refuge and manatees should be treated as the wild creatures they are, by people allowing them to have the right of way and letting them do what they want to do.
An aerial tour is a good way to find manatees and to see some of the impacts of an ever-increasing human population.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
How we doing?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Good. We'll go find some manatees today. Open.
Tour boats go about their daily business near the manatee sanctuaries where the animals are protected. But from the air, the amount of nearby shoreline development is staggering. And right in the midst of the canal lots, boats, and enormous homes are hundreds of manatees.
human population has grown very rapidly. It's a very desirable place to come down and live in Florida and to bring your boats and to live right on the water. Those kinds of burdens on the society of having 1,000 people a day moving in and living and occupying Florida habitat is putting a greater drain on the habitat that's out there in the environment. And this is the same habitat and environment that is utilized by manatees. With our growing population in Florida, more and more people, greater demands on the freshwater resources, we've tapped water out of the aquifer. So flow reductions at even Crystal River and all of the other natural artesian springs that we've been monitoring is down significantly from historical periods. And in fact, it's even projected that in the next 10 and 20 years, reduction of some of these springs may fall 10, 15%. And that's a substantial amount less of warm water coming out that manatees will have available.
Nearby Homosassa River and its springs have seen even more dramatic losses in water volume over the past few years.
We were once a 6 million gallon an hour spring, now we're a 2 million gallon an hour spring. And what you have is just water being used for agriculture, for golf courses, and for housing. So it's taking water directly out of the source.
We don't have enough warm water here for manatees, and Mother Nature designed them to live around the equator in the tropics. Then Florida and the southeastern United States is not becoming a very suitable place to have manatees.
On the other side of the globe, dugongs face similar challenges in their struggle to survive. And just like Florida, some of their staunchest advocates are children. Half a world away from the freshwater springs and rivers of Central Florida is the United Arab Emirates. This Middle Eastern country is a study in contrasts. Stark desert terrain, explosive urban growth, and the rich marine ecosystem of the Arabian Gulf. And this is one of the places where dugongs live. Dugongs are found along the coastlines of over 35 countries. The two largest populations are centered off Western Australia and the Arabian Gulf. Unlike manatees, dugongs spend their entire lives in saltwater. There are more dugongs than manatees in the world, but they are spread out over a much larger geographic area. They are still considered an endangered species. And like manatees, dugongs face daunting challenges in their struggle for survival, especially pressures from a growing human population.
The growth in the last 30 years has been tremendous. The population of United Arab Emirates as a whole in 1968 was about less than 200,000. Today we are talking about 5 million people. Most of them are living along the coastal belt. This creates a tremendous challenge for us. We have a number of very important habitats and very important species, some of which have global importance, like the dugongs and the sea turtles. It is our duty, it's an international duty for us to protect these dugongs.
Dugongs are frequently struck and killed by speeding boats. But the animals live in the open ocean and do not have to navigate congested waterways like manatees do. Boats are not their greatest threat. The most serious obstacle they face is the development and dredging of their coastline habitat. This is where lush beds of seagrass are found. Just like their North American cousins, dugongs need a lot of food. Because seagrasses are generally very low in nutritional value, they have to eat constantly, and dugongs roam over vast areas of the ocean floor in search of food. In traditional wooden dhows, dugongs were historically hunted for their succulent meat. But since the 1960s, they've been a protected species. Fishermen used to use handheld harpoons to capture and kill the animals. The government of the United Arab Emirates has since drafted comprehensive and far-sighted legislation in regards to marine conservation. And dugongs continue to be one of their top priorities.
All right, children, what is this animal called? Dugong. What is it called? Dugong. It is the most important animal because there are very few left.
Marine protected areas and strong awareness campaigns are helping to protect dugongs. Children are also introduced to the marine environment by scientists who visit local schools. Students are also encouraged to participate in hands-on field trips.
We have more than 120,000 students we work with in different schools, and we have different programs, and we have also educational program for marine environment. Learn more about the biodiversity and learn more about the ecosystem they live in. But still, we have more to do. We will know that if we've been effective or not when they grow up and start living within this ecosystem.
Awareness campaigns in the United Arab Emirates appear to be working. After decades of sharp decline, the dugongs of Abu Dhabi are showing encouraging signs of recovery. Getting the message out to new generations has proven to be a key tool in marine conservation. Back in Central Florida, manatee numbers seem to have stabilized and are perhaps even growing. But is it far too early to remove them from the Endangered Species Act? Florida manatees have no natural enemies and are believed to live up to 60 years or more. Current estimates indicate a stable but small population of perhaps 4,000 animals. They are still very much at risk. Manatees mature and reproduce slowly. They generally give birth to a single calf only once every 3 years. And with few offspring to replace animals killed, the population doesn't recover easily. Sanctuaries and restricted manatee zones have been created throughout Florida, and warning signs are posted in waterways frequented by both the mammals and by boat traffic. Aggressive public relations work and media attention is getting the message out. And snorkeling with manatees is helping to foster a new generation of passionate advocates for manatee conservation.
I had someone once come up to me and say, you know, I wasn't here for dinosaurs. Why do my kids have to see manatees? And I think, you know, it's really kind of sad we didn't see dinosaurs. They'd be magnificent animals to work with and to study and to see on this planet. Likewise, we can do very little on our part and still have manatees around, but it means making a sacrifice. So the big question is, are you willing to make a sacrifice for something in your environment? And a lot of people will say no, but I think it's against our human nature not to try.
Stabilizing the manatee population and increasing their numbers is a goal shared by many in Florida, and the animals are doing relatively well. Like the bald eagle and other species which were removed from the Endangered Species Act, manatees are being considered for delisting. But there is close to unanimous opposition to the controversial move. Is it far too early to remove them from the act?
The state agencies essentially realized that there were probably more manatees in Florida than we've had, and so the prognosis was that you'd had a pretty good developing, growing population. The feds have followed suit with that kind of rationale and logic as well and made recommendations. And generally the models you have are the best assumption of what's happened to a population in the past and predicting what's going to happen in the future. And that's fine if everything stays status quo and nothing changes. But we know every day it's a ticking bomb with manatees, that things are changing that are unprecedented, have not happened to manatees before. If you look in the near future, manatees have done pretty well. Is that a reason to take them off the list?
Right now, they're afforded the protection of an endangered species. They also have a lot of sanctuaries set aside for them because they're an endangered species. Delisting them would, for one, make those sanctuaries possible areas to be developed. And that would take away more habitat for them and potentially cause a lot of problems for the animals that are recovering. There are some pretty large lobbying groups in Florida that want to see them changed from endangered to threatened on the listing status, and they have their own agendas and their own reasons for that, but in our particular case, we're definitely not looking for that to happen and hoping that it doesn't.
You have lobbying industry that one extreme say, I want to go fast in my boat, I have that right, you shouldn't be imposing any restrictions on me. And then the other group says, well, we shouldn't even have boats out there in the first place. Let's restore it back to the way it was before people came on the planet. And both are extremes, so what you have to do is kind of meet in the middle.
Manatees are luckily still on the endangered species list. For now, manatees and dugongs are holding their own, but they continue to face many challenges.